Hi, everyone, and thank you so much to Karen and to everybody who put this together today, and to all of you. The catch-22 with my book is that the people who need it most are often the busiest. So thank you for taking time out of your workday to be here and to share in the collaboration of making things better for new working parents in the workplace. So our talk today is going to be about how new parents can revolutionize America's workplace culture. So when I was expecting my baby, I found my first son. It was about 9 years ago. I was working at Glamour magazine, a pretty supportive environment, actually. And I found that there was a lot out there for the first 3 trimesters, which were pregnancy. And then when I had my son, I found actually there was a lot of advice for the newborn phase and for baby care. And that continues on. You learn how to diaper your baby. You learn how to potty train. There wasn't anything for going back to work, and that was what I desperately needed. And I discovered that there's actually a whole other trimester, a 5th trimester, and it's when the working mom is born. So going back to work, we're suffering right now in America from a crisis of expectations for women. In some ways, it served us really well. We expect the best. We expect we can do everything, and often we achieve it. However, it can bite us in the rear end also, because we have all these expectations of motherhood. Motherhood is supposed to be so beautiful and this incredibly meaningful experience, and of course it is, but when we're not supported in a larger way by our culture, it can also be incredibly challenging. So we hope the transition to motherhood will feel as if you're meditating on motherhood, and actually sometimes it feels like you're drowning. And that is due to a lot of reasons, but primarily because, and this is better than most places here at Google, but primarily because you're just not getting enough time home with your baby before you have to go back to work. I know it was my biggest obstacle. So when you look at FMLA, which is what we're offered by the government, which is 12 weeks of unpaid leave, when you get into who's actually able to take that leave, it gets really unavailable. So the United States guarantees 12 weeks of unpaid leave only if you've been at that employer for 1 year or more, if you work full-time, and if your company has 50 or more employees. So once you do the math on all the Venn diagramming of who actually fits in that little, availability to have it, you end up with only 56% of working women qualify for FMLA. That blue area on the circle in front of you is everybody who doesn't qualify. But then even of the people who are qualified to be able to take it, I don't know about you, but I don't know that many moms who can afford to not be paid for a quarter of their year. So many don't take it. And what we end up with is that 25% of American mothers take 2 weeks or less of maternity leave. And then, compounding the problem, let's look at that 12-week-old baby. So I mentioned this idea of the 4th trimester, which was how I learned from this book called The Happiest Baby on the Block, written by a wonderful pediatrician named Harvey Karp, who establishes this sort of phenomenon of the 4th trimester, which is the idea that human babies are actually born a whole trimester too soon because of the size of the pelvis and the size of the brain. And so to soothe a newborn baby, you swaddle that baby, you shush them. It's all these S verbs. Anyone who's expecting a baby or who has a baby in this audience probably knows this. But I remember reading that book and finding it so helpful and also so frustrating, because page after page, he would say, just get to 12 weeks. Get to 12 weeks and your baby will wake up to the world, start to get on a schedule, they'll give something back to you. And I thought, that's exactly when I go back to work. I also have to add, back to those expectations from before, that when I was getting ready to have my first son, I packed my going to the hospital bag probably like 3 months before I actually went there, and I included in it a little going home outfit with a giraffe on it. I'd picked it out especially. I really loved it. And even though I had a full 40-week baby born at 6.5 pounds, that little outfit didn't fit him until he was 4 months old, which just gives you a sense. And I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I babysat my whole life. I know what a newborn baby looks like, and yet still my expectations were still so out of line for what this tiny baby was going to look like. The other thing I threw into that bag at the very last minute was my yellow work folder, which was everything I intended to do while in labor at the hospital, and then over the course of my entire maternity leave. Thankfully, my employer was understanding. It didn't actually expect me to send any of that work back in, but I thought I should be able to. So fast forward through these 12 months of cranky baby who I'm shushing and swaddling, and we get to the end of it, and even at 12 weeks, that baby is not yet on a nap schedule, not sleeping through the night, not sitting up, certainly, not eating anything but breast milk or formula, and is starting to smile and give something back to me and be that baby that I thought I was going to give birth to, who ended up not actually being a real baby until he was more like 3 or 4 months old, which was when I was back at work. So I discovered there is actually this whole developmental phase that is missing, and it's the 5th trimester. So looking at this chart, you'll see that at 8.5 weeks is the average FMLA that most American women use. 12 weeks is the amount actually allowed. At 22 weeks in my own research, and I'll tell you how I came about this research, mom starts to feel better physically. At 24 weeks, she starts to feel better emotionally, and you can see what's happening with baby through the same amount of time. But then, of course, look at that big chunk of the 5th trimester. She's been back at work by then for much of this time. So I realized there is this whole missing developmental phase, and I wrote a book. In order to write that book, I knew I had to look beyond my own experience, because my experience, to be completely honest and candid, was one of great privilege. I had a supportive partner. I was able to take a couple of my weeks unpaid. We saved up for it. It was not a big problem for us. We were able to hire a caregiver in our home who I really trusted, and I knew I had to look beyond my own experience, because if I felt this desperate, surely women who had less support felt even more so. So I decided to do a giant survey. It was national, and I reached almost 800 moms, and I asked them all kinds of things about their return to work and about what worked, what didn't, what was hard, what kind of support they found most beneficial. Universally, they said they wanted to help, they wanted to participate, they wanted to offer the collective wisdom that they had, and I put it all together into this book. Now, I should also note that these moms were from all 50 states. They were, some of them, executives and CEOs running their own companies. Some of them were at Fortune 500 companies. Some of them were doctors and lawyers and nurses. Some of them were shift workers. Some of them were teachers. Some of them were hourly wage workers. And they also had as many approaches to motherhood as I could think of. So there were same-sex parents who had carried the baby and same-sex parents who had not carried the baby. There were single moms, adoptive moms, moms who used surrogates. I really wanted to see, what do we all have in common, and what parts of our experience can we pull from one another to be this giant working mom mentor. I also interviewed dads and partners to see their experience and to actually get their insight into what maybe these moms couldn't tell us about themselves. How did they see their partners and wives dealing with it? And then I did more than 100 long-form, hour-long interviews to really go deeper. And what I came up with was a lot of solutions. So we know from the research and anecdotally and from my own research that new working mothers need longer paid leave, which positively impacts employee retention, of course, job satisfaction, future earnings, mom's physical health, mom's mental health, and baby's physical health too. The reason it impacts baby's physical health, and I am very much a fed is best kind of mom, however you feed your baby is fine with me. However, breastfed babies are much less likely to have ear infections and respiratory infections, and so they're healthier. Mom's chances of having a perinatal mood disorder dramatically go down if she's had 6 months of paid leave. This 6-month number keeps bubbling up. It's really an important support for new parents. But they also need cultural workplace shifts upon their return to work. They need support from above and below. They need support from their peers. They need the right degree of communication when they're out on leave. They need a gentle reentry plan, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And they need acceptance of new boundaries. So just to look specifically at what a great family leave policy looks like, and this is ever evolving. Even in the year that I was researching the book and in the 2 years since then, since it's come out, things have changed dramatically. A good policy at this point, and I think it will continue to be improved upon, is inclusive, fully inclusive, of same-sex parents and adoptive parents. It equalizes the time offered to both women and men, doing away with this whole notion of primary and secondary parents. It allows for intermittent leave. It allows, if you have 2 parents, it allows you to use each other as a resource, and one person can take their leave a little bit later, perhaps filling in as the primary caregiver when the original primary caregiver goes back to work. And it also offers hourly and shift workers, and we've seen this recently happening at Starbucks and Amazon, the same paid leave that their corporate colleagues get as well. So just to give you a smattering, and I had 50 questions and hundreds of data points, honestly, but this is just a smattering of what I came up with and guided the advice that I gave in the book, but also guided where I looked to for expertise, because I'm actually not an expert. What I am is somebody who is a journalist who finds the right experts and who finds women who've been through this who can offer their expertise. So here are just some statistics. 76% of the moms who I surveyed said they wished for a longer leave. It's a good starting point. 71% of partnered moms fought more with their spouse during their 5th trimester than they ever had before, and that includes during the newborn phase. So even when they were healing, they were more able to kind of communicate clearly than they were on the other side of it going back to work. 79% said that they spent 1 hour or less per week on me time. This guided me because this wasn't a matter of how can I find you more me time. It's more like, can we talk to mental health experts about how do you reframe what me time is and take more pleasure in what you actually do have to do with your day? Because if I could give you a 25th hour, I would. Instead, I'm going to help you try to see the time that you have differently. They reported, these mothers, that their commutes were 50% more stressful after having a baby. And this actually tied back into me time. There was a lot of correlation between the two, and how can you use that sort of what's seen as lost time in your day to actually be good to yourself. They spent 6 minutes each morning. This is sad. This is the point at which somebody, when I gave this talk, started to cry. They spent 6 minutes each morning simply enjoying their baby. They actually spent more time getting ready than they ever had before, but less time on themselves, which helped me realize that we need to give advice about, how can you organize your closet? Is organizing your closet an important part of going back to work? It turns out it actually is, so that you can be more efficient, have more of that time in the morning spent actually enjoying being a mother for the bookends of your day that you do have with your children. I came into this, I will fully admit, somewhat biased. I thought I was going to hear from parents that those who had bosses that did not have children were not as understanding about the transition. That ended up not really being true. Bosses without kids were only 12% harder to please. Again, this becomes much more about introspection and how we feel about ourselves and how we project ourselves in the workplace than it is about like the bad guys doing bad to us. Pumping is a really big deal for a new mom. 81% of moms who pumped said that work negatively impacted their ability to feed their baby, and 32%, including this guy, described being walked in on. That's awesome. So in 2018, what does a good work reentry plan look like? Because we know that it's not just about policies, it's actually about people being able to use them and then being supported in their reentry when they come back. So it includes a phase back option, and this is starting to happen largely at law firms, actually, is where I'm seeing it, where employees are offered full-time salary for part-time work temporarily, just to ease their way back in, because especially working in a really competitive field, like if you're in big law, if you work at Google, if you work in tech, going from 0 to 60, which is really more like 0 to 80, can be very startling when you're already, it's compounded by having a sense of self that has changed anyway, and certainly a day with a hard stop that it may not have had previously. A good reentry plan also includes access to high-quality lactation rooms with privacy, hospital-grade pumps, and the ability to work there. This was really key. Women reported that it's not just about the logistics of being able to pump, it's about that feeling of the stigma of it, of feeling like, oh, it's just a break in my day when my day is already shortened by having to get home to this child, and you don't want to be seen as a person who's taking breaks when your day is already shorter. If you can work through it, and that's not that's not an option for everyone. Some people actually sort of need to be in the zone, but once you get into the groove, many women reported that they could work through it. So it's also about having a thoughtfully set up lactation room that allows you to do work, and then this is really key, exiting the lactation room with that milk, and then basically announcing casually that you did a bunch of work during that time. It's important. They also need flexible work schedules and locations. And most importantly, they need a culture where employees feel like they can use every one of these benefits with no stigma. One quick note in my research, I really, as I said, I came into it with some of my own biases. I shouldn't even really tell you what they all are, but so I did breastfeed my babies and I pumped for them. We had a nanny in our home, and I'm very upfront about that, but we sort of, with the scheduling, it wasn't going to work for us to use daycare, but I made sure to interview a lot of moms who did use daycare and home care and all kinds of other childcare I hadn't even thought of, because I wanted to see what their experiences were like too. But so I really came into this deeper interviewing I did after I did the surveying with this idea of breastfeed or don't. Take as little or as much time as you like. This was surprising to me. There was a breadth. I talked about all the different kinds of diversity. There was a diversity even among the women's ambition, and it did not really fall along economic lines. There were women who worked hourly jobs who were actually feeling quite ambitious coming back, and there were women in very high-paid jobs who reported that they kind of had a blip of ambition and they weren't so sure about it all anymore. So this was really interesting to look at too, and it helped me check my own biases about moms staying in or not. Really, more than anything, I just want new mothers to have options in the workplace and agency and to be able to make the right decisions for their families, absent a federal plan that supports them. So the other thing that I realized is that these women could achieve change, and they reported that they had achieved change by leaning in, certainly. Love Sheryl Sandberg. They leaned into their jobs, they came back, they moved up the ladder, and they officially made policy change from within. But I also really, really wanted people to know that it counts just to stumble. It counts just to show up, come back, talk about what's hard. I'll tell you a story about how this was actually what inspired the book for me in the first place. I had been back for a couple of months. I was tired. I definitely had circles under my eyes. I definitely had left a lot of meetings because I needed to pump, and I was pretty vocal about it. And after a couple months, a colleague, Danielle, came into my office. I had hired her a couple of months maybe before I went on leave. We didn't know each other that well yet. And she said to me, I just want to say thank you for being so open and honest about your motherhood in the workplace. And I thought, oh God, have I been unprofessional? I was a little bit of a young manager. I thought, am I doing okay? And then she went on to say, because you've shown me I can do it too. You've shown me that it's hard, there are problems to solve, but that I'll get through it. Thank you. I know I'm going to keep with it one day. And that was my eureka moment. It took me years to be able to dig in and do the research too, to be able to produce this book and this movement, but that stuck with me. So yes, stumbling works. Don't fake it till you make it. If you fake it, nobody knows there's a problem. If you pretend everything's okay, how can you expect anyone to support you and help make it better? Be comfortable being seen as a mom. You have to bring your parenthood to the workplace for anyone to know that your personal life is important to you. And what I really hope is that by solving this very visible personal life problem of a pregnancy or expecting a baby, we will actually be solving personal life issues for anyone with a personal life, which is everyone, right? Everybody has something in their life that they care about as much as you care about that baby. And by solving our problems, that's going to trickle over into greater corporate culture. And as I said earlier, you need to broadcast successes in spite of visible challenges. This is something that a maternal mental health expert I talked to, a psychiatrist named Kristen Drake, tells the mothers that she works with, who she sees who are struggling through. She kind of role plays with them how to go in and ask for accommodations in the workplace. She tells them, think contextually. It is a unique situation of the American mother that we have to ad hoc negotiate these things for ourselves. We are left to our own devices in terms of this planning, but also more important in terms of the judgments we make about ourselves in the process. Recognizing that can quiet the noise in your mind a bit as you go into those meetings. Your new working motherhood is full of benefits to your workplace and to your home, and that's recognized everywhere else in the world. We are assets, not liabilities, and you need to feel that and negotiate with that in mind. A word about mommy guilt, because I will say the one thing that I actually invested in and splurged on is I'm a very must do everything myself kind of person. The one thing I didn't do is I didn't transcribe my interviews. I hired an awesome single mom in Ohio to transcribe my interviews, and Sarah's the best. Anyway, I'm so glad that she sent all these files back to me, and I could see that one word popped off the page again and again and again. If you were to make a word cloud, guilt would be the biggest word. Every single person I interviewed talked about guilt, only guess what? It meant different things to different people. Some people felt very guilty for being for being at work and leaving their baby in the care of someone who they felt was less capable than they were. Other people felt guilty for enjoying being at work, which led me to think, as I was teaching my son about division, if you all have the same common denominator, let's scratch it out. Let's not call it guilt. Let's call it whatever the actual feeling is and the experience is so that we can solve for it. So don't just write off your motherhood experience and the challenges of it as guilt. You've done nothing wrong. And if all else fails, be this lady. And now I think I'm going to have a conversation with Karen. Thank you, guys.
As I mentioned, I just loved your book so much. So I want to read just a short paragraph to the audience to show you guys how spot on, especially for those of you who have just come back from work. It's got the beginning of the book when you talk about what it's like to come back to work for working moms. In short, it's a mess. The typical professional mother in the United States goes back to work very, very sleep deprived. She's just started getting positive emotions back from her baby. She's about to experience the rockiest period ever in her relationship. She has no free time. Every 3 hours, her body makes milk that leaks onto her lovely work clothes if she does not do something about it. And baby and body aside, she's about to come back to a job that other people have been covering for her with various degrees of happiness and resentment about that fact. And it goes on. It's just so good. And it's so spot on. And I feel like everyone should read that, whether you're a working mom or not. I feel like it's really hard to express what it's like to come back when you just get back from work, and people don't realize all that you're going through. So what are your recommendations on how do you even start that conversation at work without making people feel awkward when you say, I have to go pump, or, this is what I'm going through?
Right.
How do you kind of start that conversation in the workplace and have it stay appropriate?
Well, thanks. I think first you have to realize that it's your discomfort that makes someone else feel uncomfortable. And if you can sort of flatly say, oh, I'm going to go pump now, like it's no big deal, it gives them permission to realize it's no big deal. And maybe the first time it feels like a big deal, but the second and third and 489th time, it will not be a big deal. The other thing I tell moms is that when you're coming back, you can feel less than. You can feel, and this is not particularly PC to say, but you can feel like you're less capable than before. The research actually proves otherwise. You are in many, many ways more capable. You're better at pivoting because that baby drill sergeant has taught you that you don't really need time between activities anymore. You can just, turn on a dime. You're better at prioritizing your time. You're better at saying yes to things. You're better at saying no to things. You're more nurturing, of course. But when you come back to work, you may not feel all of that immediately. Hopefully, if you've read my book, you will. It'll internalize it. But the one thing you can really know that you're doing and be proud of is broadcast. Broadcast the stuff that's hard, and you will actually be doing something positive for your workplace. You will be helping make things better for other women. And I hate to give anyone a list of to-dos ever. There really is not a single list of to-dos in the entire book. But I would add this one, really try your hardest to know that you're going to pay a little bit forward, and you will reap the benefits of the confidence that gives you too.
Yeah, I cannot underscore that enough. For those of you that know me and work with me, I'm pretty vocal about this stuff. One, I'm just a generally open person. But after reading this book, I also have been trying to be more vocal about my experience. And last week I had an executive summit that was a full day meeting, and because everyone on my team knows I use the mother's room and I'm just back and I'm feeding, breastfeeding my baby, somebody on my team said, here's where we need to go, here's the agenda for our offsite, here's the execs that are coming, and by the way, here's the closest mother's room. And it was a male on my team that did that, and I was so touched by it. It really meant a lot that if all the planning of this big executive summit, he kind of took the time to look up where the closest mother room was to the conference room we'd be in, and it really helped me save time. So I just kind of underscore that, and that's an example that I've had very recently within the last couple of weeks.
It's amazing. It's great.
So sleep deprivation.
Yes.
I personally have a baby at home, and I have a 3-year-old toddler. So I'm lucky to get 4 hours of sleep in a row these days between my toddler waking up. He just has these nightmares on occasion, and then the baby sometimes just wants to eat or wants a pacifier or a little snuggle. How do you recommend we kind of come to work and bring our best self there when we're kind of running on empty with very little sleep?
So this is really if you want to just boil the fifth trimester down to one thing, it is about sleep deprivation. The women who I surveyed told me that they were on average starting to sleep 7 hours straight, not consistently, but starting to at the 7-month postpartum mark. So at that point, they had been back at work for many months, most of them. Everything else falls apart if you can't sleep and if you're not sleeping. All of the other advice, none of it really counts as much unless you're getting a good night's sleep. There's so many strategies, like everything else in the book, I didn't really think of it from the baby care perspective, because far be it from me to tell you how to sleep train your baby. My 6-year-old slept in a sleeping bag on my floor last night. But what I can do is I decided I could interview women who are experts in maternal sleep. So these are PhDs who study sleep. One of them also has a side gig studying the military's use of sleep deprivation as a weapon of war. She's awesome. And they basically said, so I'm not even joking you, every expert said, oh, well, coffee's okay, which is true. A little bit of coffee is okay. But there are all kinds of strategies. It starts at home, certainly. It starts with actually with parity in parental leave and with being able to lean on your partner to take the nighttime shifts at least as much as you do, particularly if your body is still healing and emotionally you're still getting better. What the sleep expert said, it's funny that you mentioned 4 hours, because that is really the minimum. What you want to do if you can is take turns with your partner, ideally for 2 nights in a row, but at a bare minimum for 2 REM cycles in a row. And that is basically 4 hours. It's 3 3/4 to 4 1/4 hours. And that resets you enough. If you are coming back to work after 2 nights in a row of not very much sleep or fragmented sleep, you are as impaired, the experts told me, as if you're showing up drunk. And think of that also for your work in the home. If you're on maternity leave and you're home with that baby and you haven't shared the night with your partner, if you're lucky to have a partner as a resource, and I have to add, the single moms who I interviewed were amazing for getting through all of this, but they also just checked their egos and dove into asking every single thing they needed from the people in their lives in a way that all of us should embrace. But if you have that partner, you have to share the wake-up duties with him. You have to think of your job at home the next morning, taking care of a human baby, as the most important job in the world, just as important as your partner's who's going off to work.
After you kind of get that sleep done, my morning starts pretty crazy. So I want to ask you a question about the transitional times. Even on a good day, when I get a good night's sleep, my morning is something like this. The kids wake up around the same time. My toddler is yelling for me or my husband to come get him. And the baby starts crying because she's hungry. And we'll just kind of like keep swapping of like who's feeding who and who's taking care of who and who's showering and getting dressed and putting on makeup. And it's chaos. And then I kind of like leave in the morning. As soon as the nanny gets there, I'll like give her the baby and I'll run to go pump one more time before I get to work. And then I leave and my toddler's kind of like holding on my leg, telling me he doesn't want me to go to work. And the baby, who's like should have gone back to sleep by now, is crying. And I've probably been up since 5 or 6 in the morning.
You lived a whole life.
And I've lived a whole life, and I stumble in like I just came out of a storm. Like my hair is everywhere, and I'm holding my pump bag and my purse and my computer.
That part gets better, I promise.
And then like it's 10 a.m. and I'm like just making it to my 10 o'clock meeting. So for me, you know, my morning is crazy, and I'm assuming it's like that for a lot of parents coming back, especially moms. What are your recommendations for that transitional morning time to kind of not lose our minds and get to work and feel like we're ready to go? So
the transitional times really, in all of the sort of anecdotal evidence that I had from these women, are by far the most stressful parts of their day. And it is because it is the logistics that you're describing, and it's also that emotional feeling of being neither here nor there. It's, you know, you're not fully on as a mom, you're not fully on as a worker, you're in between, you should be spending time on yourself, but like who has time to spend on herself? And it's really hard. The thing that helps the most is the thing that I was actually, I have to admit, the most hesitant to include in the book. My bias is that I worked at Glamour magazine for years. I oversaw a lot of the fashion and beauty pages, and so some of the stuff I just know. But there's this thing that happens, and this was always sort of in me, but when you have a new baby, you don't feel like prioritizing this stuff. It does not feel as important as it may once have to you before. You know, you are, instead of lipstick, you have baby, and baby feels a lot more important than lipstick. So what I looked at in my research and with the experts that I talked to was not, you know, how do you look better? It's how do you feel better about the way you look, and how do you compress your time in the morning to make it really efficient in terms of impacting how you look and how you present yourself to the world. So there are some really concrete tips that are things like, for your closet in the morning, don't let your closet be a torture device. You shouldn't open the door and see everything that doesn't fit and think like, is that going to work with that? I don't know. You actually need to make a miniature closet within your closet of the 6 things that fit. If you see that you don't have a pair of pants, by God, go out and buy a pair of pants. But then every morning, pull just from that little section. And you can add to it as things start to fit, or if you're going on a work trip and you need kind of different kinds of clothes, fine, but it just simplifies it. And then in terms of beauty, there's a lot of wanting to cover up under eye circles. And sure, yes, concealer is great. But the dermatologist I talked to, who treats all these celebrities and who knows every trick in the book, basically said it comes down to washing your face at night to make sure to take that time to do that, and drinking a lot of water. And she just really recommends more than anything that you try to take good care of your skin in those ways, because then you'll need less makeup in the morning to feel good. And all of the research, I was so hesitant to include some of this stuff, but all of the research really proves that when you're back at work, the way you look affects how people think of you, but it's also largely because it affects how you feel about yourself. And you project that. Like it or not, you do, and it really has an impact.
One thing I noticed for me, and you also mentioned this in your book, is that when you're pregnant, it's visible. And everybody at work takes extra care. Oh, you can't, I totally understand. You have a doctor's appointment, that's fine. But you kind of get more of that sensitivity versus when you come back to work after having the baby, it's almost more stressful. Well, it definitely is more stressful, but people don't see you physically pregnant anymore, so they just assume you're fine and you're back to your normal self. So how do you think about how we should speak to our managers about that, and what we ask of them, and what sort of advice do you have on how to talk to our manager about the needs that we have when it might not be as apparent for them to have the same sensitivities before we left?
So this is a really, really important question, because for a lot of women, this is the first big negotiation they do in their, both at home and in their careers. And if they do it well and they get what they want, it fuels them to ask for things in the future that are also going to propel their careers. And I don't really talk about happiness in the book. It's really going to propel their satisfaction, because that's what I think is really important. So there are some very specific tips about negotiating. So first, the earlier in the process of having a baby or expecting a baby that you ask for this stuff, the easier it is to have that wish granted, and the easier it is to feel like you're contributing to the greater whole at work. So if you, and you never know exactly how you're going to feel, but if you come back after having been away and you suddenly then want to adjust your hours, your flexibility, whatever it is, it can feel like a sloughing off of duties, and you're asking people who've been filling in for you to give you even more leeway. Instead, if you can, you want to really try to anticipate pretty much as soon as you announce a pregnancy or that you're expecting to adopt, how you envision your job changing. And you may renege on some of that, and you may rethink some of it when the baby actually comes, but it allows you to not just get rid of stuff, but actually train the people around you who want to grow up into some of it, and makes you feel like and be a good manager. It also then frees you up to think, what am I going to fill this time with now that I'm not going to be traveling 3 times a month, and I have this person I've been working with who I've trained to go out and do that outward facing stuff. What are they, what can I fill my time with? And often it's bigger picture thinking, and it's bigger projects. The other thing is, whenever you're in a negotiation, obviously manage up. You want to think about, what are you're going into the conversation with a plan, not an ask. You really have to tell yourself that. This is a plan for how it's going to work, and how you're going to think of things in terms of deliverables, how you're going to still do your job and deliver your job that you get paid for. And then the other thing that I heard from a lot of women that's incredibly helpful is to ask for it temporarily, to say, hey, can we please just try this? Because what that does is it just keeps your manager from, feeling like they're signing, in blood that you're allowed to do this forever, and by the way, then setting a legal precedent that they have to offer this to everyone else too. It allows you to try it, see how it's going, adjust on the fly as you're going, and then if you've set it up as like a 2-month check-in, 3-month check-in, you go back in and you have a baby, babies' needs change. If not by the month, if not by the week, by the month, and you can come back and you might actually have other needs at that moment that you can renegotiate for, and it becomes much more of a conversation that's ongoing that will serve you as your children's needs grow and change too.
Absolutely. That's really helpful advice. I'm going to take some of that.
I wish I had
for
it.
a couple of things I have on my mind. I want to circle back on role models and peer mentoring. While I do that, if anyone else has questions from the audience, you guys can start lining up at the mics, and we'll take questions from the audience. So here at Google, we do have pretty generous maternity leaves as compared to other companies in the United States. And even so, there's still guilt, I'm going to just use that word for now, about taking the full leave. And I've had countless people, even on my team, come and say, you know, I don't know if I should take my full maternity leave. I have so much going on, or maybe I don't need that month before I go out. And I remember thinking the same thing, even though I've told everybody on my team, no, you have to take it. This is an amazing benefit. You're going to want the time. And I remember when I was taking my first maternity leave, I said, you know, I don't need to take the whole time, not knowing what I was getting into. And my boss, who was a male at the time, said, absolutely not. You are taking your whole leave. And he told me to take it, and I tell everyone on my team to take it. But I said, and I was a director at the time, I said, I haven't seen a lot of other directors taking the full maternity leave. Is that something I should do? Because there's so many people, you know, depending on me. And of course, we're all replaceable, but I just felt like I didn't want to let anyone down. And he said to me, like, no, well, you are the role model. Like, you are the one that has to take your leave and show all the other women and men that they should take paternity leaves. And I just think whether you have a role model or we're doing peer mentoring for each other, it is really important to kind of set the precedent. And is there anything else you kind of want to share with the group on how we can do even more of that?
Sure.
We can like announce what we're doing. We can encourage each other. But if there are other tips, I think that's what will give us all strength to kind of ask for the things that we need.
I just couldn't agree more. I really just could not agree more with you. Like I said, I really tried to check my own biases, and I was compelled by a number of women who had their own businesses, worked for themselves, and had to take a very short amount of leave, whether it was a day, 2 weeks. I understood where they were coming from. If you are working, though, at a corporation that has policies that other people at various levels are going to be using, even if you're not at the tippy top, you have to show the people around you, beneath you, and above you that this is a problem worth solving. And the worth is really the key word. You have to show that you're worth it. I think the absolute best way that we can solve this problem is by establishing parity for what's available for dads and what's available for moms. Same-sex couples, kind of all, whatever your approach is to parenthood, you should get and you should take the same as the people around you, because the message that gets sent otherwise, and I'm just going to be binary about this, but if dad takes far less leave than mom takes, what dad is saying is, I'm more important at work. And more important at work translates to dollars, and it gets into all the other things we're talking about in our culture right now, about the pay gap, about the motherhood penalty. It's real because of this. The other thing that gets set up when you have unequal leave is that mom, especially if mom is like us and a woman who is packing her bag 3 months before she goes to the hospital, mom wants to be an expert at being a parent, and dad probably does too. But if mom is home with baby and dad is off at work, mom is turning this into her job. Rightly so. I certainly did this, and I understand why everyone does. You want to know everything about it. You're Googling everything. And so you become an expert. But then when you go back to work and you and your partner get home at the end of the day, again, this is assuming sort of a typical work schedule, guess who knows how to do everything? You. Dad doesn't. Even with the best intentions of in the world, when you first got together and when you talked about how you planned on parenting together, if you know everything, he doesn't know everything. A, he doesn't know how to do it. B, you're going to have a harder time trusting him to learn how to do it. And if you're coming from different workplaces, of course, you may just have different options offered to you. One solution is for dad to take, or the partner to take intermittent leave. So when mom goes back to work, actually have dad take a chunk of leave then and be home with the baby for a month. It allows the baby to get a little bit older and less vulnerable, being left in a non-family member's care. It also lets that second parent really be in the muck of it, get it, understand it, learn these things, and then for mom to see, hey, look who handled it, it wasn't me. This is great. And there's actually research that shows that for every month of paternity leave a dad takes, mom's lifetime earnings increase by 7%. Wow. There's even research that shows that paternity leave impacts dads' relationships with their children when they're teenagers. It's really pretty incredible.
That's great. Lauren, thank you so much. Let's take some questions
Yeah.
from the audience.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. I'm actually about to head out on my second maternity leave next week. And I really appreciate all this advice. So
Thanks.
the challenge that I'm facing is, while emotionally it was harder for me to leave my baby, physically it was actually easier to like get ready in the morning because he was still a blob.
Yeah.
And breakfast didn't involve like a spoon and like all these things and cleanup. And so it was easier. I looked better in the beginning because I could take a little bit more time for myself and just like play with him and look at him. And now that I have a toddler, I have a 2-year-old, that is a way more demanding sort of like contact sport. It feels like. And so I was curious what your 10th trimester looked like, what your second, fifth trimester looked like.
Yeah, I'm in my 30th one now, and it is bigger kids, bigger problems, but they can communicate. So that's the big difference, is that, your older child will now be able to, for better and for worse, communicate their needs and listen to, your directions too. I actually found I was really helped by being pretty deliberate about how I used the time that I had on my maternity leave. As I said earlier, we had a nanny in our home, and we were able to keep her employed and around while I was on maternity leave, which was a privilege and a luxury. But what that allowed more than anything was for me to take special time with my older child between nursings. Usually it was about 90 minutes, like every afternoon, where I would take him out to go do something. And I felt like everything else about this, it's about kind of pinching yourself and reminding yourself that you are doing this good thing that you planned, that you were capable of doing. And so it gave me time with him alone. And so, because my worry going back was like, I was not just going to feel, I knew I'd feel better about leaving the baby because I'd done it once before. I was going to feel terrible leaving this child who could now ask me to stay. And so he was only 3 years old, but we talked a lot in that time about why mommy works, because I didn't want him to get used to the idea that I was just going to be home. And, I was lucky to work in a magazine where I could show him the pages, of what I was working on. And I remember there was a bunch of awards that we were giving out to college students, and some of them were inventing all kinds of amazing, cool technology. And so he really related to that. And so for a year, he would just say, "Oh, my mommy makes a magazine about women who put clouds in the sky." It helped me so much to feel like the transition in the morning was going to be messy. I was going to have yogurt on my shirt, and you plan for that. You have an extra shirt at your desk if you can. But I felt so much better and so much more full of kind of purpose and meaning being able to communicate that to him. I think it goes a long way for the child and for the parent, and to help you get through the mess of those early years. And it does get easier, I promise. Okay. Does that help? I don't know if that's specific enough. You don't want the baby to get short shrift. Yes. Well, also, so that baby, guess what that baby has? That baby has a big sibling. That's amazing. Like, the first kid didn't have one of those. I'm the oldest of 4. I would love a big sibling. So you have to really remind yourself that, what you're giving is a whole family experience. And somebody asked me once why I didn't use the word balance more in the book than I did. And it's like, I think the word balance is used maybe twice in 352 pages. And I said, it's because I don't feel like anybody should feel like they're a fulcrum. You shouldn't have to tighten your core and stand like this. You should be able to lean way in toward work sometimes, which is just the nature of the work that we do. I know it's the nature of the work that you do. And you should be able to lean way into family sometimes, and not only just when you're on vacation. Like, there may be times when there's something going on with your kid that requires your full attention. And so it's also giving yourself kind of the benefit and the grace of that, of the long-term perspective, and saying, like, I'm kind of ridiculous, but I will even actually put a date on my calendar kind of every 3 months seasonally as a check-in of how has my balance been? Do I feel like, yes, this week was really work and this week was really kids, but overall, does it feel lined up the way I want it to be? And I found I like to control things. I found that control of something that seems out of control really helpful.
Thank you.
Sure.
Take a question over here.
So thank you for being here, but also thank you for all of the work that you've put into this, because what I can honestly say is you were able to put data points together to help explain emotions and feelings that when you're going through them as a new mom or as a second mom or as a mom with a second baby, third baby, etc., you don't fully understand. Your husband will ask you, well, how are you feeling? And you're like, I'm sad. But you can't really say why you're sad, or you can't really explain why you're over emotional. You just kind of are. And I think everyone goes towards hormones, but there's other reasons as to why you're sad. So as I was reading through the book, there's one quote that really stuck with me, and I sent it to my husband. So the truth is, we expect more and more from mothers without giving them any more support. The result is you have mothers who think they should be able to work and have babies and find that magic balance. So I found one of the balance. And then it says, the result is every mom feels like she's failing and falling behind. I mean, you go through your highs and lows, but I will say as a new mom, most of the time I really did feel like I was falling behind in the mom department.
Yeah.
So I sent that to my mom, my husband, and his reaction was, what's your opinion on it? And I said, it's 100% true. No, it's 110%. Wait, it's 200%. And his response to me was, H-M-M-M-M-M. So, I mean, he can't fully understand what I'm going through all the time, and I completely respect that. But my question to you is, I felt I connected very much to your book, right? But I want to understand, how can I help my husband connect to some of the topics in the book so he has a better understanding of what I've been through, because I don't think I do a very good job of explaining. I'm very much the fake it until you make it, until I have like an overload and all of a sudden we're in a huge fight.
Oh, we sound similar. Thank you. Thank you for reading that part of it. Well, it's funny. There's so much I've actually learned since I've written the book in the speaking and the consulting that I've been doing. And a woman at a law firm recently told me, she was like, I just got to share with you exactly what I did because it worked. And she's amazing. So before she went back to work after having her baby, she got really concrete. And I think I mentioned that this book does not really have very many to-do lists in it. So she made not a to-do list, but a like what it takes list of every single thing that goes into not just childcare, but who's managing the paperwork and the bills in the house, who's remembering people's birthdays, and got really granular about it. And then she told her husband she was doing it, so it didn't come out of left field. And then she said, I want you to add everything to this list that you can think of. And she had thought of most of it. He added a few things. I think she was glad that he had some things to add. And then she said, let's make a time and sit down together and go through it and divide it up evenly. And you did have to, it takes work. You have to assign a time to each of the things. But the act of doing it, again, feels so empowering that even if you waver from that list and like maybe you're doing the laundry one night instead of him because who knows why, the fact that it exists is something to come back to. And the fact that from the very beginning you've established that a lot of this is in your head, this is the mental load problem and not necessarily in his, getting it on paper is really good for both of you. So I think that's one tip that I've taken, from a reader.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Go with one more question.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and I just want to echo what Heidi said. It's awesome to have you here, and thank you for putting all of this together so us busy working moms don't have to.
It's my pleasure.
The question I have touches on something that you spoke about just briefly, motherhood debt.
Yeah.
So I took my maximum amount of leave because it was given to me, and I should. But returning to work has left me feeling like I'm behind, and I'm now scrambling to take on as many things as I can to get back ahead, which then puts me in a feeling of being completely overwhelmed. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or perspective on that that you could share.
Well, I do think some of that can be handled industry by industry. I can't remember if I mentioned this when I was talking about sort of the post-leave things that companies can do, but there is so much, especially if you're working in a bonus-driven business, in a business that has commission, in a business with billable hours, where it's just so quantifiable what you've missed out on, and I think that needs to be accounted for somehow in the leave policy and in the benefits policy that come around having a children. Anytime you can put numbers and dollars to something, it really does help, and you internalize that value as well. But some of it is just hard, and some of it, it just takes time to get through. I will say this is going to sound kind of counterintuitive, but one thing that a lot of women told me has helped them is, and again, I don't want to add anything to anybody's to-do list, but when you come back, if you can do something to help one of your colleagues who doesn't have children or who might have grown children and is not near this phase of life anymore, and tend to something, do them a favor, tend to something in their personal life, and you'll feel so good, first of all, that you were able to even think beyond your own little bubble of need right now, which is very real. But it also sends a signal that this is not just a uterus issue. This is not just a having a baby issue. This is a greater personal life need issue in the workplace. And it also just sends this message that, yeah, you caught that ball for me for some time while I was out. I'm going to be here to catch it for you too. If and when you have a parent who gets sick. This is just about being a good person in the workplace and bringing that goodness to work and helping it fuel the work that you do. And so that can feel really good to feel like you're doing something for someone else in that moment too.
Let's take one last question.
Hi, thank you. I just had a question about the language we use to describe parental leave.
Sure.
I find myself even doing this, but saying, oh, Google has a really generous leave policy. And I think that undermines the business value side of why we do it. Like, this isn't just because we want to be nice to new moms.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could offer some alternative language to use and also maybe share some of the business side value that a company gets from providing something like this other than...
I love this question. You're so right. It's not generous. It's humane, because it is actually kind of the baseline standard in every other developed country in the world, and even in a lot of developing countries too. So yeah, I'm going to change my lexicon in that way too. It's humane leave that's given here. So I think the best thing that you can do is to really is to think the way you're thinking about how you express this transition. Sorry, tell me again the second part of your question. Oh, about the value. Okay.
So I think even different than it being humane, but it's also like Google is doing this because they're benefiting from it as well.
Absolutely. So there are studies. There are plenty of studies, and you have to look internationally to find them, unfortunately. Well, that's not totally true. There's good studies in California that show that business has not suffered and has actually improved, and these are surveys of business owners since they implemented paid family leave, but their paid family leave is tiny. And New York State, of course, just unrolled its first phase of paid family leave as well, which is the way it's set up is a model that is really actually almost identical to the Family Act, which had been proposed for years and years on a federal level. And so my hope is that if it succeeds in New York and if we see it rolling out reasonably over the next, it's from now till 2021, that it will have greater national impact. But to find real data about what the value of this is, you really have to look internationally. So Norway is ranked consistently the happiest country in the world. It also has a huge percentage, I wish I had it on the tip of my tongue and I don't, of not just working moms, which can be a little bit of a misunderstanding, but full-time working moms. Huge percentage of moms in Norway work full-time. They have incredibly humane benefits around parental leave for both the mom and the dad. And then when you look at the economics of it, actually their GDP average per capita is the highest of I think the 18 top developed countries in the world. So you have moms and dads who are home with their babies for this vital time. They are staying in the workforce in a full-time capacity and then contributing to their country's economies. That's really compelling. The other thing that I like to tell people about is a study that was done by KPMG for Vodafone when they were trying to look at their policies in all their countries. And they're not a huge presence here in the United States, but they're very big in Europe in particular. And they looked at the value of offering, I'm going to get this right, it's 6 months of paid leave, maybe it's 16 weeks of paid leave, but then also this gentle reentry plan of paying for, I think, 6 additional weeks of full-time pay at part-time work upon return. And they found when they did the math on it that it would save, if every private company in the world did this, it would save $19 billion in money that is lost from people leaving. Retention is incredibly valuable, and also it doesn't even put a price on the reputation boost that you get from having these humane policies. So it's retention, it's recruiting, it's reputation, all of that. If you can put a dollar amount on that in any way, it makes a really compelling case when you ask for what you need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Lauren is going to stay and sign some books. We have books in the back, and you guys should all read this book. It's amazing, life-changing, totally relatable. And Lauren, thank you so much for coming to chat
Thank
with
you,
us at
guys.
Google. What a treat to have you here.
Thanks, Karen.